of course I was kind of hoping, well, maybe we'll get sleet or maybe, no, we got an ice storm. And it was the whole night. I remember it was about 11 o'clock at night, our power went out. And we're laying there in the dark with about 6 blankets over us. And you could hear the trees breaking. You could hear the transformers popping, and then you could hear thunder, and it was just apocalyptic. It was crazy. But I tell you, I have this thing that I call Chainsaws and Casseroles. I actually named a book that once, and it's not a cookbook, just to let you know that. Everybody's like, is this a cookbook? I said, number one, you do not want to eat my food, all right? Nobody, I can screw up Cheerios, so I'm not a good cook. But I have a theory, and I saw it during Katrina, and I'm seeing it this week in Oxford. When things get bad, we get good. In Mississippi, we have a superpower, and I call it chainsaws and casseroles, because before, like for instance, when a tornado hits your house, before you can get out of the rubble, there will be a church fan in your front yard full of people with chainsaws and casseroles, because they're going to cut that pine tree off your roof, and they're going to feed you. Then you're going to eat good, right? And that's what we do, and we're seeing a lot of that right now. But it's been a tough week, and I'll be really honest with you. I felt kind of guilty last night just laying there in a nice warm bed in the hotel. It was great, and enjoyed it. Although I will say we got very fortunate at our house. We got power after 2 days. A lot of people in Oxford do not have power right now, and they do not have water. So it's kind of been a really iffy situation. Very similar after a hurricane with the tree damage and everything like that. The big difference is you can actually put your food out on the back porch, which is kind of nice. I actually think it's great. So, but we're doing okay. We're going to go ahead and see if I can get this thing to advance. No, I can't. Okay. What am I doing wrong over here? Oh, look there. All right. So this was out my front door in my backyard, just to kind of give you an idea of how snowy it was. Have good times, right? There we go. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. There was a cardinal. Look at that. It's amazing what happens when you turn the remote on. It does miracles. See, the problem I've got right now is my wife is not right here to fix it for me. So, and this was my favorite. This was when the power actually came back on. And it was like literally that moment when you realized that the light was going to beat the dark. Is when the ice was going to melt. Now I have to admit, when I got here, I got a drink, and they asked me if I wanted ice. And I said, no, I do not want ice. Ever again. This was a drawing I did. If you can see on the lines, it says the word hope. It's amazing what happens to your whole personality after about 2 or 3 days of being in the cold, and then suddenly the lights come back on. It's like this great moment of, we saw it after Katrina too. It's amazing on that. This is a cartoon that nobody has seen yet because it'll be in Monday's Mississippi Today. It's the 5 stages of grief, from denial to, basically bargaining to anger. And at the end of the day, it's acceptance. And it's acceptance that, the best way through is to help other people through.
Right.
And we're seeing a lot of that right now. These are a few of the cartoons, just so that you can get to know me a little bit. This was my very first cartoon that I ever did in Mississippi. December 17th, 1996. I was living in San Diego, California. How many of you have been to San Diego? Okay, how many of you think I was insane for leaving San Diego? Yeah, it's 74 degrees and sunny there all the time. It's just really, if you love weather, it's paradise. But if you love making fun of politicians, Mississippi is paradise, right? I have never had to work a day in my life, right? I have a crack team of commie writers in the state capitol that give me great material. I got a call from my former editor in Conroe, Texas, when I lived down there, named Dan Turner. His daughter works here, I'm very proud to say, and he was my editor down there, and he told me the job was open at the Clarion Ledger, and I said, the number you have reached has been disconnected, and I hung up. He kept after me like Sam I Am, and I finally got a chance for an interview. They flew me into Jackson. We're flying in over the reservoir. It's dark. I see water. I put on my life vest, and the flight attendant told me to take it off, that I was scaring the other passengers because I thought we were going into the lake. They picked me up that night at 10:30, drove me around Jackson, Mississippi in the dark, and this was how the tour went. I think Eudora Welty lives there. oh, there's UMC. That's a great place to go if you're ever shy. And it was just like, it was not a Chamber of Commerce moment. And I remember it was like, they took me to a fancy steak place and everybody came and I said, wow, everybody wants to meet me. And they're like, no, they want to get a free steak. And I kind of realized what I was getting into. When I got back to San Diego and I turned in my notice, my boss at the time said, why would you go to Mississippi? And I said, well, from the interview, it's the people. And I talked to him recently, it's been 30 years, and he said, so why have you stayed in Mississippi? And I said, oh, that's easy, it's the people.
Amen.
And I am so honored to be able to come speak to you today. Now, you got to understand, there's a time in my life, well before I was married, that I would have killed to be in this room. You know, being one of like one men. But, you know, it really is the people, and I've really enjoyed that a lot. So this was cartoon number 1. This is my favorite all-time cartoon. It's United We Stand. And although this may seem quaint or old-fashioned or whatever, this was drawn 2 days after the second tower fell on 9/11. And I'm most proud of that one. This was the first time I was a Pulitzer finalist, which is a very fancy way of saying I lost. Now, I gotta tell you, my dad is why I'm an editorial cartoonist. My dad is Dave Ramsey. How many of you have heard of Dave Ramsey? Yeah, he's named after my dad. It's okay? So, true story, Dave's my cousin, the one on the radio, and our dads are brothers, so we're named after each other's dads. So basically, my cousin got the money, I got the hair. That's how it worked out in our family. Dad looked at me, I was 8 years old, and it was when Jimmy Carter was running for president. We lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And I remember looking at all those great editorial cartoons of Jimmy Carter with these giant teeth. And I was 8. I like to make fun of people because I was an 8-year-old, right? And so I remember walking up to my dad and I said, I want to be the best. I want to be an editorial cartoonist. And he said, you'll be the best one ever. I was like, wow, what a great answer. It lit a pilot light in my heart. It really helped me persevere through a few rough years along the way. Well, now that I've bragged on my dad a little bit, we were sitting in Neyland Stadium. He and I both went to the University of Tennessee, and that was our love language, right? We could talk football together. You know, even if we didn't agree on anything in this world, we agreed on football. So we would talk about that. So we were in this stadium, 102,000 people, and I'd just been named a Pulitzer finalist, and I was all cocky, and I said, I bet I'm the only 2-time Pulitzer finalist in this whole stadium. And my dad looks at me and smiles and says, and I'm the only other person who cares. This cartoon was actually drawn in between the towers falling. It's really hard. I remember that day, we all remember that day. My oldest son was in a high chair, and my wife and I were squabbling over something because of the baby. We're trying to get him out and, you know, get to school. We watched it all go down. Well, I went to the paper, and we're sitting there watching this go down on TV, and they showed the Statue of Liberty standing proudly before the smoke. And so I got this idea, and I drew it literally in an hour, and it's still one of my favorites because there's a silver lining on that black cloud. The fact that on that day, there were people that ran into the towers to help us. And I think it was one of those moments where we were just like, oh yeah, there's first responders out there every single day. Oh yeah, like the people up in Oxford right now that are getting our lights and power back on, that are unselfishly out there working in our behalf, and suddenly we realized it. So I mean, there was nothing good that happened September 11th per se, but on September 12th, it was a beautiful thing. And so I like to think about this cartoon as my favorite. This one was a Katrina cartoon, and I think it would go definitely very well what's going up in Oxford right now. When the lights came back on after Katrina, we knew we were going to make it, right? It was just a moment of hope, and so this is one of my favorites as well. And how long do I have, Doc? And about as long as this hospital. You know, that was one of my favorites too. All right, so let me talk about a dog for a minute. And you're thinking, well, Marshall, what does a dog have to do with anything? That's Banjo. Banjo was a used dog. Now, I would say he was a rescue dog, but we were his third family. By the time you get to be the third family, you're a used dog. And so what happened was Banjo started his life in Nashville, Tennessee. And so he lived with a Great Dane, and apparently the wife went back to work, so Banjo was left alone, and he decided to carve a trench in their brand new wood floors. Yeah, so Banjo moved to Atlanta. he got to live with a dog named Bullet. As you can imagine, if you live with somebody named Bullet, there's going to be violence. Bullet and Banjo were frenemies, which meant one minute they loved each other, the next minute they tried to kill each other. So we get a phone call from the people that we got our other dog from, and she said, how would you like a second dog? And what I heard was, how would you like to double your vet bills? And before I could say no, the phone was intercepted by my lovely wife, Amy, and she said, we'll be there in 6 hours. 6 hours later, we're standing in this basement of this lady, and this little brown dog walks in the room and into our hearts, and Banjo was amazing. We got him when he was 4. It is true, by the way, when we came back to Mississippi, that Amy did go through Alabama with the Banjo on her knee. It did happen. True story. True story. So Banjo was a great dog, right? And we had 2 boys at that point, and for some reason we had a third. We couldn't quite figure out how that kept happening. So we had a third boy, and it was great. He was about 10, Banjo was, the boy was not. The boy was an infant. And he was waking up every hour. And he had ear infections. We didn't realize it at the time because he was just waking up. He wasn't really screaming. And so Banjo started waking up every hour too. And I thought, wow, this dog has got empathy. No, he had diabetes. He didn't have empathy. And he was getting up every hour because he had to go to the bathroom. So we took him to the vet. My 2 sons are with me. By the way, never take your little kids with you to the vet. Because the vets look at me and say, well, we got 2 choices with Banjo. We can either give him insulin twice a day or you can put him down. And I didn't want to tell my kids that we were going to put them down because I didn't want my kids thinking as soon as I got old that as soon as Dad got sick, we could just put them down. I didn't want to set that example. So I, for the next 4 years, battled Banjo's teeth and gave him a shot twice a day. And we kept him going pretty well. Like, I'd be here, Dad, Banjo just fell off the bed. And we go in there and rub Cairo syrup on his gums and bring him back like Lazarus, you know. And so, well, I had gotten a radio show, and I was busy. I was working 5 days a week for Super Talk. That's who I was working for at the time. And so Amy decided she wanted the boys to go with her family down to Destin on a vacation, and she left me and Banjo alone because she figured that maybe I was grown up enough to be able to take care of Banjo. Banjo got sick. Banjo got pancreatitis. You don't want pancreatitis. And Banjo was very sick. I came home, and normally he greets me like, you know, I've just liberated Paris, which is the beautiful thing about a dog. That's why they're so good for your mental health, right? Well, Banjo did not come, and I found him, and he was all curled up in the corner, and he was almost dead. He was very sick. So I grabbed Banjo, I put him in the car, I take him to the emergency vet. They look at Banjo, and they're like, we're going to try. But you're probably going to have to come and say goodbye to him, and we will call you when you need to come do that. 3 o'clock in the morning, my cell phone goes off. You're going to have to come say goodbye to Banjo. I cried all the way to the vet because honestly I like dogs better than people. And they'd left the back door open. And so I go in the back door, there's a hallway, and there's this one room with one light. I mean, literally Hollywood couldn't have done this scene any better. And all the animals were around the perimeter of the room asleep, and there was Banjo on a little table. And Banjo was fighting. He was breathing rapidly, he was struggling. He had all these tubes in him. And so me, being 6'1", 225 pounds, laid down on the table next to Banjo. And I started petting. And I started telling him how much he meant to us and to the family. I love you, Banjo. You're amazing. You're incredible. Because he spoke fluent English, so he understood what I was saying, right? And then I lifted up his little ear and I said, and if you beat this, I will write the check. Before I could get the last word out of my mouth, his little eye went, bink. And that stupid dog got up and walked out of there 3 days later. And I wrote the biggest check I've ever written for an animal in my life. I wrote on the memo line for Lazarus. And as I was walking out with Banjo, all the vets were there in a line giving him a standing ovation because I had just bought them a Porsche. I love Banjo. Banjo taught me something that day. Banjo taught me that if you have that will, you can do incredible things. And he did. So when he did pass away, I created a book called Banjo's Dream. It was an A through Z book because I was lazy and it was just an easy way to be able to do a children's book. And it sold really well, gave kids a lot of hope. I remember kids coming up to me saying, I want to be like Banjo. And these kids had diabetes. And they're like, I want to be like him. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I want to be old and smelly. And I said, well, you're going to succeed, because Banjo's definitely old and smelly. But it was really great. And the thing was, I couldn't follow it up. I couldn't come up with a second book. So when the pandemic hit, I started doing free coloring sheets every day on the internet. And I have a firm belief when it comes to art that if you put things out into the universe, something good's going to come back.
Yes, indeed.
I truly believe that. And a lot of times they're like, well, you need to be charging more for that or whatever. And yes, I do make a living doing this, but I like to give something away free. And we were all trapped in our houses. And I thought, well, if I get up there and I sing on the internet, that would be actually more torture than the pandemic itself. So I did coloring sheets. And I came up with some ideas. So I used Banjo, Pip, who was our current dog at the time, Sam, who was our 26-pound cat, who was actually larger than Banjo, and then an alligator who lived in our neighborhood who could have technically eaten the other characters but did not realize it. And so I created that. So one day I'm talking with Michael Farris-Smith, who's an author up in Oxford, and I was interviewing him, and I said, I've got this idea for a story, and he said, why haven't you written it? See, think about that. How many stories have you not written in your life, right? And so it was one of those moments I'm like, well, yeah, I need to actually sit down and I need to write this. So I did. I wrote it, and this is the book, Saving Sam, that we did, which has really done well. I've been very proud of it. I went to the National Book Festival to represent Mississippi in the children's category. It was a lot of fun. It was good to be able to revisit Banjo and Pip and so forth and do that. So that's been fun. These are just a few of the pages just to show you the colors and everything were fun to do. I enjoyed this one, just the public restroom as a fire hydrant. Kind of made me laugh a little bit. And then the kids love this one because they see the cat in the sunrise when he's going off to save his best friend. This is Pip, the real Pip. She passed away last November. She was a sweetheart, actually a year ago. And there's the Emmy that she won. So she didn't let me live that one down. She demanded more treats. And this is our new puppy. This is Ollie. He's right now keeping my wife warm in the bed. So he's a very spoiled young man. So you'll see Ollie on my social media. Everybody in this room is an artist. And I'm going to prove it. All right, so there was a news story that came out that said Barbara Bush has been taken off of support for her COPD, and that was all the reports. My mother had just died of COPD. A lot of the reason why I'm standing here right now is because of the health journey of my mother and because of my sisters. And just to kind of give you a brief overlay of what's gone on in my family, my first memories really as a child were being snuck into the hospital because they didn't allow children under 6 into the hospital to see my mother after her first cancer surgery. Then she had breast cancer. And back then, nobody talked about breast cancer, right? This was during the 70s. Thank goodness for Pat Ford, I think it was, the first lady who actually, talked about it a little bit. So nobody talked about it, and that about drove my mother crazy. My sisters had breast cancer. My aunts had breast cancer. My mother's cousins had breast cancer. My great-grandmothers had breast cancer. My dad's had bladder cancer. I've had melanoma. Oh yeah, my doctor said, well, the good news is you're not going to die of a heart attack. I said, I feel much better about that. Oh, that's great. My wife's mother recently passed away from breast cancer. She had a recurrence. She had fought it for a long time. The good news is my wife was able to travel with her mom and spend lots of time. But so when I heard about Barbara Bush, my mother had COPD, and that's what she had passed away from. She lived another 20 years after breast cancer, actually 30 years. So she had quite a good life. But I had known when I heard that I knew that Barbara Bush was not going to be with us for long. So I started thinking about Barbara Bush's life. Now here's a woman who had everything, right? Money, power, a brand of her own, but her husband was president, and her son was president. Oh yeah, her other son was a governor. Her other son was a successful businessman. Her daughter was successful. Her granddaughter was on the Today Show. But she had suffered the worst loss that any parent could possibly ever face. See, in the 1950s, the Bush family, they had George, that we know, right? But they also had a daughter named Robin. And Robin was a beautiful little blonde-headed girl, and she got leukemia. As you know now, childhood leukemia is curable. It's a very tough cure, but it's a cure. But back in the 50s, the science hadn't caught up with it. And the Bushes, who had means, tried everything in their power to save that precious little girl. And they couldn't. So I knew that because I'd read John Meacham's excellent book biography on the Bush family. And so I thought of this idea. Now, having Robin greeting her mother in heaven. This was the actual cartoon. This is how I present my ideas to my editors, because you don't present full drawings to editors, because if they say no, then you've wasted 2 to 3 hours of your life. So this is what I presented. This is the actual cartoon itself. The last minute touch, and I think what makes this a really good cartoon, was I had the word mama. Now there's some things in your head where you're thinking. Number one, I have never been to heaven. Most people don't think I'm going to get there. In fact, I get told that I'm going to go somewhere else that's very warm. Today I probably would take it, but most days no. So I'm thinking about this whole thing. Okay, would she recognize her mom with white hair and pearls and everything like that? So I said mom, right? So I did that cartoon. To me, that was just like a God thing. I have God moments when it comes to cartoon ideas. Sometimes I'll have to work for 5 hours on an idea. Other times you just get a flash in your head, and then you realize, oh, this is my cartoon. So I did the cartoon, didn't think anything of it, posted it, and then within moments, I saw this post. It said, someone sent this to me. I don't know the artist, but I love her. So for 2 hours, I was a woman. And then she switched it back to him. So I just want to let you know that I understand women's health because I was a woman for 2 hours. My wife is thrilled about that. She now believes I understand what women go through because I was one for 2 hours. Anyway, so Elise Jordan, who is from Holly Springs, who's on MS Now, I guess it's what it's called. Anyway, she sent this to Jenna, and Jenna posted it. You can see the numbers at the bottom on the screen. This thing was going viral at this point, but I didn't really think anything of it. Now, I had Jeb Bush Jr., who I didn't even know existed, talking about low energy. He liked it. So the Bush family, though, really instantly just kind of hung on to this cartoon. And I'll explain in a few minutes why in just a second. But it was really kind of a neat moment. Then I get a call from the Today Show. How many of you get calls from the Today Show? Me neither. It was a producer. And it was really funny. She's like, we would like to use your cartoon on all of our platforms, which is a really nice way of saying we would like to use your intellectual property and not pay you for it. And I, being the cunning businessman that I am, said, okay. And so they put it on their Instagram, and I thought, well, that's nice. So once again, it went viral, and I was really touched. Well, the next morning at my house, at 7 o'clock is the witching hour because my wife teaches elementary school. So she generally has to, and we lived like 2 minutes from the school, so she would have to leave and go to the school or she'd be late. So 7 o'clock, we're running late. The NBC has on this really lovely package about Jenna's grandmother. Jenna's put it together, and it was very touching and lovely. Well, we're watching it, tears are flowing because we feel the pain, and all suddenly, boom, they show my cartoon at the very end, and things got weird. First of all, my phone started going off, and I was hearing from everybody. It was like a slot machine going ding, 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 ding. I mean, like ex-girlfriends have restraining orders again. So I'm like, you cannot contact me. It's been, the judge says you can't do this, And then it got really weird because Savannah and Hoda start saying, oh, that Marshall Ramsey is the sweetest, most sensitive man. And my wife's looking at it going, that's the biggest crock I've ever heard in my life. And then Kathy Lee Gifford comes out there and goes, I like that Marshall Ramsey, and she's sloshing wine around. It was an out-of-body, weird experience to have people on national television talk about you. Thank goodness in a good way, but it was still weird. And then it got weirder. So here's Savannah right here. It's faith and motherhood and love. And I mean, literally nobody's ever said that about me in my life. So it was really wonderful. By the way, Savannah Guthrie, she's a really cool human being. I really like her a lot. Really got to speak to her a few times and really have been impressed. And here's Jenna's. This image is such a comfort. It depicts what we know to be true. My precious Ganny reunited with her precious angel. Thanks for this. What I found out later, and I'll tell you that story in just a second, but what I found out later was at the moment that I thought of that cartoon idea, and I mentioned earlier how it was a God moment, the moment I thought of that cartoon idea, George W. Bush was on his knees next to his mother talking about Robin. That little girl had an oversized presence in the Bush household. Every room had a photograph of Robin in it. Never underestimate the wound that took forever to heal, which I believe is healed now. But I went to the Bush Library to speak, and in the back, there are 3 graves. George H.W. Bush, Barbara Bush, and Robin. Very powerful. So anyway, it was nice to know that I had somehow caught lightning. It was a God thing, it wasn't me. But then it got weird. Southern Living. If you ever saw my yard, you would know I'd never be in Southern Living. Trust me. But I was. And it was pearls of steel. Really? I almost did that idea too. I'm glad I didn't. Here's Savannah Guthrie and Brett Baer, both waxing lovely about me in the cartoon. By the way, I got NBC News and Fox News to agree on something. I deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. That ain't happening again. So I thought that was pretty cool. Then my university found me because they thought I had money. So they wrote nice things and they gave me an award, so that was nice. Then they found out I had no money. But then I started hearing from people who'd lost children. And it wasn't, Marshall, man, thank you. We loved the cartoon and it brought us hope or whatever. It was, Marshall, we love the cartoon, it brought us hope, but let me tell you about my child. And I listened. Over 1,000 people contacted me. Through email, through Twitter, through stopping me at Kroger. They told me their story. Every day we wake up. Every day we are given a blank canvas. Every day we can make a difference in somebody's life. And you know, here's the tricky part is because if you go and you try to make difference in people's lives, I don't think it really works as well. And I tell this to my wife, who's a teacher, who literally for 13 years taught art down in Madison. Now she teaches up in Oxford. But she was like, I don't think I make a difference. I'm like, how many times do you have a high school student come up to you, Amy, that says, thank you for teaching me art in kindergarten. I fell in love with it, and now I want to be an artist because of what you did. We're all artists. We all can, with our actions, which I guess are our brush strokes, and our attitude, which are the colors, we can create something on the canvas of what we do every single day to make a difference in somebody's life. And you know what's so beautiful about it? You may never know it. And that's what's great about it. And that was that one time that I was I've done 10,000 cartoons since I've been here. I can maybe remember 100 of them. Because that's a lot of stuff to remember. I mean, I've had 3 boys. It's like having several concussions. It's very similar. And so, I don't remember a lot of things. But the fact that I was able to make a difference with a piece of art that I did was incredible. And it kind of changed how I view what I do and how I see things. George H.W. Bush died a few months later. This was the cartoon I did. Basically what happened was Amy came in at 11 o'clock at night. I was asleep in the chair because I am a very active and exciting human being. I was asleep in my recliner and she woke me up and she said, President Bush died. And I said, well, he's not that old. She said, no, not W, H.W. And I was like, oh. And so I drew this cartoon by 1 o'clock. I posted it by 2 o'clock. Brett Baer's talking about it on Fox News. By 6 o'clock, I'm on Fox and Friends. By 7 o'clock, I got a call from CNN, and they wanted to be on television. So this guy right here is really awesome. He's a photographer in Canton. So this was how the phone call went down with CNN. CNN said, Mr. Ramsey, we want you in studio. There's a place down in Jackson. We will send a car to come pick you up at 4:30 in the morning. And I was like, well, I live in Jackson. I don't need a car. I might hit a deer on the way down there from where I live, but I think and Amy's like, you're sending the car. You need to do that. And I'm like, okay. Okay. So I said, send the car. So I'm sitting out on my front porch on the steps in Madison, Mississippi, and this like big limo SUV pulls up. It's this guy who's awesome. And he opens up the door for me. We got our Ussie there together. He opens up the door, and there's snacks in there. I mean, literally when this car rolled up, it was like the end of Pretty Woman, just without the prostitution. It was really great. He points to snacks. I sit down, I buckle myself in, and he says, Mr. Ramsey, is there one thing I can do for you? And I said, yes. And he said, what's that? I said, lay on the horn. My neighbors have got to see this. So he takes me down to Jackson, to this little room that's green. You've seen the green screen that they do for television? So I literally felt like I was inside a Kermit's stomach. You know, it's just everything was green around me. They had a little IFB in my ear. I didn't have a monitor, so I couldn't see John Berman, who I was talking to. And then for 8 minutes, which might as well have been 8 hours, I had to talk to him on live television. As you'll notice here, there's a theme. I wear the same clothes all the time. I literally was terrified doing, and I had a television show. I mean, I don't even know why I was nervous about it, but I was just nervous I was going to mess up because I didn't want to embarrass Mississippi. But then I thought, man, that bar is low. There's a lot of people that have done a lot more to embarrass Mississippi than I'll ever do. And so it was good, and I knew I had done okay because my brother-in-law, who watches Fox News all the time, said, well, I watched it and you didn't blank up. And I said, well, that's good. I'm glad that you liked it. It was great. So we were talking just a minute about, I agree with the president about women running things. The Jackson Junior League contacted me and said, hey, we're inviting Jenna Bush Hager to come be our speaker at Mistletoe Marketplace. How many of you have ever been to Mistletoe? Okay, that is one of the most well-oiled machines in the history of well-oiled machines. If the Jackson Junior League ran the state, we would be #1 in everything, and we'd have cut flowers in the bathrooms. It's incredible. Well, their deal was, and their pitch was, we're inviting her, we want you to be our gift to her. I said, no, you need to get flowers and chocolates, okay? Because that's not quite enough. So they're like, okay. So, but here was the plan, right? So we're in a room kind of like this, right? There's like, I was one of 3 guys out of 1,000 people. There's my wife sitting there, who very seldomly comes to hear me speak because she's been married to me for 32 years and has heard all my jokes ad nauseum because I tend to repeat myself. So, but she was there because she wanted to meet Jenna, and it was great. So she's sitting there, and the plan was Aaron Pickens, the really talented Channel 16 anchor, was going to interview her for an hour, and then I was going to pop out from behind the curtains like this. And here's how it was going to go, because Jenna was going to turn around and see me after I looked like John Belushi in Animal House, popping out like that, and she's going to say, who's that? But that's not how it went down. So first of all, Aaron, instead of talking for an hour, talked for 45 minutes. That meant there was 15 minutes of dead air. So when I pop out like that, Jenna turns around and sees me and starts bawling. Oh, copious tears. I mean, it was makeup going everywhere. And I'm looking out in the audience and every woman's horrified that I just made Jenna Bush Hager cry. And my wife's over there laughing. She's like, she knew I was about to die, so no, I didn't have to die. But anyway, she came, Jenna ran and gave me a big hug, and she said, sit down. Once again, notice what I'm wearing. So just to let you know that. I always look like a page out of the Kohl's catalog. But it was wonderful. We talked for 15 minutes, and that's when she told me about the timeline and everything that was going on. She's a wonderful human being. That was really a great experience on that. Pass this one. All right, I didn't mention Dave Ramsey. That's Dave Ramsey, so I'm not making that up, I promise. But I'm not going to talk about him. I'm going to talk about my dad, Dave Ramsey. I love that old guy. He was great. He was a good dad. Both my parents are fantastic. My mom's an art teacher. My dad was a salesman until one day he decided he wanted to open a car garage, and I was really proud of him for having that entrepreneurial spirit. My dad loved to water ski. And I'm not talking like loved to water ski. I mean like he was obsessed with it. That was one of his favorite things to do in the world. That's him water skiing at the age of 50. And here's him water skiing at the age of 78. Yeah, that's Dave Ramsey being pulled by Dave Ramsey with David Ramsey in the boat. People always say, How are you related to Dave Ramsey? I said, well, he's my cousin, my son, and my dad. And they're like, oh, that's right, your family is from East Tennessee, aren't they? I was like, yes, they are. Dad loved to water ski. And you know, like any dad, you want to share your passions with your children. And he really wanted me to learn to water ski, and he was 40 at the time, and I was 8. But really, I was 40 and he was 8. He was a big kid, and I was terrified of the thought of him dragging me up and down the Tennessee River, which is where this crime is about to happen. And so I just fought it until one day, my grandparents had a cabin on the Tennessee River near Knoxville. And so he threw me in the boat, drove me 5 miles down the river because he didn't want me to escape. He's like, I know he can swim about a mile, so we're going to get him way down the river. Threw me in the water and said, you cannot get back into this boat until you get up. Okay. So I began what turned out to be me drinking about 10,000 gallons of river water. In fact, if you see this scar on my neck, that is from where I was developing gills from being drugged. Apparently, I have part concrete block in me because I could not get up. Up and down the river, up and down the river. Well, about 5:30, Dad was starting to get a little frustrated because I didn't seem to be getting this. But, you know, to my credit, I was still trying. And he said, we're going to give you one more shot, and then we're going to go get gas, and then we're going to come back out here tomorrow and do this again. I didn't want to disappoint my dad. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I wanted to make him happy. So I said, okay. And so I'm back there, my little skis. I got my ski belt on because they hadn't invented life vests yet. They didn't figure out they could spread the foam all over you to keep you above the water. But I had my light ski belt. I'm sitting there, he guns it, and I pop up. Oh, it was a great moment. I'm bent back there like that, you know, my legs are, I'm starting to stand up a little bit. I'm in the safe spot, right, in between the wake. And I'm looking at him, and I'm starting to realize that things are about to go south really fast. Because Dad was like thing 1 and thing 2. You didn't want him to be bored because things were about to go really haywire. And I could see his hand twitching, and then he turned the boat as tight as he could, and he slung his 8-year-old child outside the wake. And then he started driving it in a really tight circle. So the boat's doing about 25 miles an hour, and the little boy on the ski rope is doing 795 miles an hour. In fact, I definitely remember cracking the sound barrier. And then this happened. I hit a stick. And it wasn't a stick, it was a log. For reasons I don't understand, the Tennessee River, they raise it and they lower it, and they raise it and they lower it to get basically the mosquito control and to suck every piece of wood out into the middle of the lake. And I hit that thing, and for those of you who remember Wide World of Sports on ABC, they'd have the dude, the agony of defeat. And you see the guy going flipping down the mountain. I did 7 cartwheels when I hit that stick, and the ski hit me in the back of the head, and I face planted into that water, and I was half out. My dad, and I joke about him a lot, he was a very loving and caring man, and he pulled the boat around and he did this. He started poking me with the paddle. And these were his words. Grab the rope. And I said, no, I'm going to swim back. And he said, it's 5 miles. You can't swim that far. Grab the rope. And I said, give me one good reason why I should. And he said, well, first of all, I'm going to drag the rope to you so you don't have to swim to it. But I want you to grab the rope because we're going to change your story about how you got back up, not how you fell down. And I looked at him and I said, yes, sir. And he brought me the rope. He gunned it. I got back up, and I've been water skiing ever since.
Okay.
Thank you. If you saw me water ski, you wouldn't be clapping. That's pretty bad. 25 years later, I'm laying in Baptist Hospital. I've been diagnosed with malignant melanoma. 3 doctors missed it. Melanoma, for those of you who don't know, it's a very fatal form of skin cancer. Mine had gone malignant, which meant it had punctured the dermis. I've literally looked like the 102nd Dalmatian. And I've had, at this point, 85 moles off. 3 have been melanomas. It's a miracle I'm still here.
Amen.
Melanoma is like the crack on your windshield. If you don't get it fixed, it'll spread and you will lose your windshield. So I'm very, very blessed to be here. It was a God moment. At the time, I had a little baby who's now 25 years old. And I didn't know if I was going to make it because I didn't know how far it had gotten. It's really interesting. The day that I was diagnosed with cancer was the day of the Mississippi flag vote in 2001. April 17, 2001. At 5:30, I got the phone call, and I've been getting death threats all day long because people were so mad about that issue. And the doctor called me up and he said, "Marshall, I don't know how to tell you this, but you've got cancer." And I started laughing. And he's like, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "This is the nicest call I've had all day. Thank you. I appreciate that." And 2 days later, I was in surgery. I'm laying there in bed, and I'm feeling this boom, 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 boom on my forehead. Now, I was on some good drugs, right? Because they had taken literally a grapefruit chunk of my back out and sewed me up, and some lymph nodes out, and 8 other moles. So I was pretty scratched up. And I'm laying there, and I'm feeling that, and I open my eyes, and there's my dad, leaning over his child, poking him in the forehead with his finger. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he looked at me and he said, "Get up." I said, "Dad, I had surgery." He said, "I know. I'll help you out." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because we're going to make your story about how you beat cancer, not how you had cancer."
Amen.
Yeah. I told this story at his funeral, by the way. It really does say a lot about who my dad is. And it also tells me about the superpower that he gave me. The fact that I can reframe situations, not to deny them, not to say they aren't bad, but to be able to look for opportunities in them. And he did. He picked me up and he walked me around the hallway at Baptist Hospital. And he continued. He stayed there and walked with me every morning in the neighborhood. You know why he did that? Because he had cancer the year before. He had a piece of his small intestine taken out because he had stage 3 bladder cancer, and they turned it into a fake bladder. And that experimental thing has not really gone well, but Dad's did. And a big reason is because he got up every morning and he did the work.
Right.
And that's what he wanted to teach his son. A few years later, actually 4 years ago, during the pandemic, I did a lot of sitting and drawing. I did over 700 pieces of art during that time because that was my way of being able to cope with the anxiety of us being locked down and all the things that were going on. And I was creating these pieces of art, and I was sitting in a bad chair. And it caused a piece of my disc to slip out, break off my back, and go up my spinal canal.
Lord
And
Jesus.
suddenly, at age 50, I'd run a marathon. At age 52 or 53 or whatever it was at the time, I have to sit back and look at the math, I couldn't walk. I was losing my legs because of that nerve compression. So I ended up going to have, double spinal surgery down at the bottom. That's a tough one. I got to tell you, I've broken a lot of bones thanks to my football and all that stuff. That one was a tough one. I don't remember. It was during the pandemic, so there was there was a shortage of nurses, there was a shortage of beds. It was really tough. I sat in recovery for about 12 hours before they could find me a bed. And they finally got me up there, and the nurse was wonderful, but she had never gotten a patient. She was like not the type of nurse for post-surgery, so she really couldn't get me out of bed real super well. But she did, and she took good care of me. And all night, there was a guy down the hall screaming, "They're trying to kill me! They're trying to kill me!" So I rang about 4 o'clock in the morning. I had not slept, and I was in an incredible amount of pain. I hit it, and she said, "Oh, sweetheart, what can I do for you?" I said, "Could you go kill him, please?" I don't think she did. I was really hoping she would take me up on that one, but she didn't. She gave me morphine instead, and I forgot that guy was ever screaming. So it worked out okay. Well, the next morning, the PT guy comes in, and he's like, "Motion is lotion. And if you get up every day and you walk, you will be healed." I'm like, "Okay, that's great." I said, "Well, what's it going to take for me to spring this joint?" He said, "Well, if you can walk 1,000 steps, we'll let you go home." I walked a mile. And that whole time, my dad's ghost, or his spirit, or whatever, was holding his son up as I walked around the same hallways that he had walked me all those years before, because it was in the same hospital. In fact, the same nurse admitted me as dead. That's the thing, when it comes to health and stuff like that. Just being able to reframe your situation and be able to look for the opportunity and be able to create that healing and looking for that window to be able to heal. And I've really had good role models in that example. I've been very fortunate with my family on that, so that's been great. Yeah, this was my surgery, good time. The first one is the one on the far left there. I get free Wi-Fi, so if you need better reception signal, come stand next to me. You'll get 5 bars with me around. It's great. I swear, every time I show somebody these pictures, they're like, "Yeah, you're a boomer for showing those pictures." I'm like, I love showing it. So the next one is literally why I'd have the scar on my neck. I was going to MC the brain and spinal cord injury 5K, and I'm running late. So I'm throwing stuff in my car, and I stand up really hard and hit my head on the top of the door frame, and it shuts my skull down so hard it caused 2 of my discs to jut out, and you can see it right there where it is compressing my spinal cord. It nearly severed it. I almost paralyzed myself. I am so committed to a cause that I'm willing to throw myself into it. That's why I do not do cancer walks anymore. I'm like, oh no, I've done that one. So anyway, they gave me 3 more, actually 6 more screws and another bracket there too. So yeah, I'm literally the bionic man. So I've been able to have a good shot on being able to experience the medical system on that. And you know what? And here's the secret. If you ever have to go into a surgery like that, if you go into it with a really positive attitude that this is going to turn out great, this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to me. I said that over and over and over. And you know what? I don't run marathons anymore, but I get up and walk an hour every single morning. And I'm better than I was. I don't have any pain. I don't even take a Tylenol. So it's really been a wonderful surgery on that. And I was, Amy's like, "You're never taking opioids again." She's like, "You're just like impossible. You think you're funny when you take opioids." She's like, "That's terrible." Yeah, here's the melanoma. That's the story. So I got the call, like I mentioned. I went to Kenny Barraza, who literally saved my life. I've always accused him of writing his name on my back when he's doing all the surgery. I said he's got an ad back there. So I've always never wanted to make fun of him. He's like, one time I'm laying there on the table and he's cutting my back. And he's cutting off a mole and he said, "I bet you're going to do a cartoon about this." And I said, "You could run naked down I-55 and I would never draw a cartoon because you have a knife in my back. Do you not understand that? You have got a free pass." I developed the worst case of anxiety after that. For good reason. I mean, when your skin tries to kill you, I think that is a legitimate reason. But I remember literally going in there one time and I felt a bump and I said, "I've got a tumor right here." And he's like, "That's your rib." Literally. And I was like, oh, okay. True story on that. And so now I've learned to be able to at least dial it back before I dial the doctor a little bit. So true story, I mentioned once again of my dad's kindness and compassion. Mom and Dad, because both being cancer survivors, decided that Marshall was stressed and Marshall needed a vacation. So they decided to get a condo in Destin. Okay, let me back up for a second. I had skin cancer, and my parents got a condo at the beach. I was like, "Dad, you might as well buy a gun. It's cheaper if you're trying to kill me. You don't need to go the condo route." So they're all out enjoying the beach. I'm inside watching Dr. Phil, because between the hours of, sunrise and sundown, I'm like a fork in the microwave. I start sparking and I'll blow up. And so finally the sun went down enough, and I was like, oh, good, I'm gonna go out. So I took my shirt off. I go running into the ocean. There's a lady and 2 little girls in the ocean, and the lady starts staring at me. I have never had a woman stare at me in my life. Okay? So I knew something was up, and I realized where her eyes were going, and they were going right to my scar, which is about that long. It was bright red, it looked ugly, I looked like I'd run naked through a briar patch because of all the other scars, and I just looked at her, and I had 2 choices, right? I could have been offended and angry and not said anything and sulked, or I could have been a jerk. I went the jerk route. And I just looked at her and I said, "Oh, that?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to look." I said, "Ma'am, it's okay. It was a shark attack and it happened right where your little girls were swimming." My wife's over there going, "You're going to know you're going to know." I made a joke. I used a little bit of humor. made fun of the situation. I made fun of myself. And I've been telling that joke now for a long time, right? You know, that little baby that was in the stroller now, like I said, he works over in Huntsville and is adulting. And it makes me so happy. My children adult. It's so cute. It's been really such an important thing for my life to be able to do that. The anxiety part, and this is where, and I'm so glad to see y'all here today. Like I said, this is such a wonderful event. You've got some incredible speakers that are going to follow on behind me. A couple of them, I mean, one that I just met, the other that I've known for a long time. I can tell you, you're in for a treat of a day. One of the problems I mentioned before, was that I got anxiety, right? Because I'm prone to it anyway, but like I said, when your skin tries to kill you, and I freaked out. I literally would go into the doctor and say, cut every mole off of me. Do you have a potato peeler? I will do it myself. And he's like, we can't do that, right? That's not sane and it's not practical. So a friend of mine, Keith Warren, a superhuman being that worked with me at the Clarion Ledger, his father had just passed away from melanoma. He'd gone in and for something else, and they looked and found one on his back. And it was too late. It had already spread, and he died within 3 months. So at that point, Keith was pretty upset. I was pretty freaked out. And Keith loved to run, and I loved to eat. So we made a natural team together, and we created a thing called the Run from the Sun. And the Run from the Sun, for 10 years we did it, a lot of it being driven by his wonderful family. But we created a 5K race that was in the afternoon, that had great music in downtown Jackson. So it was fun. It was a fun course. And we brought in my doctor, and we screened every single person that would walk in there. A few months later, I guess a couple of years into it, I think, I was driving down the road, listening to sports talk radio, and it was right before my race, and they were talking about the race, and a guy called in, and he said, man, I went to the race last year. My wife had died of cancer 2 years before me. My teenage daughter now has a dad because they found a melanoma on me, and they caught it in time, and I got a chance for her to be able to have her dad. And I pulled off to the side of the road and I started crying. And that was the first time that it hit me, that something that I could do could make a difference, but it was the moment when the anxiety went away. One of the greatest ways to be able to tackle anxiety in your life is to take the thing that you're anxious about and to help other people on the journey that they're on. I love going to survivor events with cancer and talk to stage 4 people who are just basically, you should hug them and say, I'm so sorry. And they look at you like going, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life because I can help other people on this journey and we can get through it. It's amazing how that cured my anxiety, but also too, just watching all the people that have been able to get healed over the years has been great. We finally, after a few years, stopped doing it, but I still like to let people understand about what's so important about that. Yeah, this is the shark attack story. It was great. I still laugh about that. Oh, that was fun. And I guess I learned that the best way to conquer your fear is through hope. Hope is a pathway, right? Hope is the ability to be able to see your way through the storm. And like for us, this week, I used my flashlight so I could navigate through my dark, cold house to be able to find, so I didn't trip over something and break my neck. I always thought hope was kind of the flashlight. Hope was when I'm out grilling burgers on the second day, and we were so fortunate. Don't get me wrong. I know how fortunate we are. I was sitting there, by that point, my house is about 48 degrees, right? It's dropping fast. I'm out there cooking burgers, and I hear cheers all around the neighborhood because our power had just come back on. It was a great moment. We had hope, right? And I think that these are the steps that you really, to have hope, to cure. One is have a good sense of humor. You may not think the situation calls for having humor, but humor is a wonderful balm, and it really does help you get through a lot of things. And O is the opportunity to serve. Being able to help others on your journey, it makes such a huge difference. P physical well-being. I'm probably not a good example of that because I've been stress eating all week long. Basically, we were smart enough to buy snacks for this ice storm. You know, it's like, Amy's like, well, let's get soup and let's go. Well, number one, if you're gonna get soup, make sure you don't have an electric can opener. That's rule number one of an ice storm. Number two, get snacks. And so we had to look at the little pretzels with peanut butter, so I'm not physically in great shape right now. But, you know, physically take good care of yourself. And the last one is E, and that means educate yourself. Educate yourself about your situation. Because I remember the first time I had a melanoma, it was a melanoma in situ. I don't know how your Latin is, mine was terrible, and I thought in situ meant go by coffin. In situ meant in place. See, with melanoma, it spreads out this way first, right, the radial phase, and then it drops a taproot, like a carrot, that punches through your dermis, and at that point, it's game on, right? You don't want to get to your lymph nodes, because that's kind of like getting on the interstate over here on I-59, because by the time you get to 59, you go to New Orleans or Hattiesburg or wherever. So it was like, I did not understand the conversation I was having with my doctor. Number one, now I do, because I understand melanoma. I know a lot about it now over the years because I've become educated. So if he told me right now, oh yeah, you have a melanoma in situ,